Draw your position at the table. And for the rest of you, we'll get started here in about 5 minutes or so, so mingle amongst and visit amongst yourselves for a few minutes.
Mr. Shaver, up to the front, please. her quick. Yeah, that's going to disappear.
Oh, I try to do that as much as I can, actually.
Gentlemen, welcome to the candidate forum for the District 48 legislative race being sponsored here this night, or tonight I should say, by the Kimball Banner and the Scottsbluff Farm Bureau representation here, part of the Nebraska Farm Bureau. Our format tonight is going to be opening statements, which will last about 2 minutes apiece for the candidates, to be followed by about 45 to 60 minutes worth of questions. The plan at that point is to have a lightning round of yes and no questions, followed up by 3 minutes for candidate closing statements. We do want to encourage you, if you do have questions, to go ahead and submit those on the cards that we have available. If you need a card, if a question comes up to your mind as we are progressing, please go ahead and raise your hand. We'll have somebody bring you a card and a pen, and we'll get those questions up here to be asked. Of course, these gentlemen are all seeking to move on to the general election, two of them, to replace or take the seat of John Stinner of Gering, who happens to be here with us this evening. John, of course, is term limited, and this is his last year in the Nebraska Legislature. Going to introduce our candidates here. Starting on my left is Brian Harden of Gering. Second candidate is Talon Cordell of Scottsbluff, Scott Shaver of Scottsbluff, followed by Don Lease II of Bridgeport, and Jeremiah Teeple of Gering. We'll start with our opening statements. Brian, you have the floor.
I'm Brian Harden. I grew up in this area. I went to Hague School in Mitchell Valley, and then I went to Gering High School, then to Chadron State College, then to Denver Seminary. Most of my professional life I've spent in the financial services arena, including insurance and business consulting. All of those things I still do today. And my big concerns, and part of the reason that I decided to run for this seat, is to grow people and to shrink government at every level. And in that process of growing people, I intend to help grow agriculture. That's the engine that drives this part of the world. And so one of my big concerns, particularly for the next 4 years, has to do with what I think is going to be one of the biggest challenges for agriculture in years. Our inputs for ag right now are higher than they have been exponentially in many categories, and we really didn't get a lot of help in the ag world through the Arpa funds and so on and so forth, and I think farmers are really going to have a difficult time surviving in the coming days. And so I'm deeply concerned about that. It would be lovely if we had the ability to fix problems just one at a time. Unfortunately, we get to fix a bunch of them simultaneously. One of those is jobs. we would like to have better paying jobs. There's lots of them out there, 50,000 of them, frankly, that we can't fill. Many of them, not all, but many of them, you need a couple of them to make a living. Also, we have a challenge that's ongoing and has been ongoing since 1950. It's called taxes. We also have challenges with the need for what's going on in the schools. We have CRT issues happening. We have gender bending issues that are happening. And overall, I'm deeply concerned about all of those types of things.
That's time, Mr. Harden.
Thank you.
And we do have a request for the candidates. If you would, please stand when you are answering the questions, making your statements, so the people in the back of the room may be able to see you as well. Talon Cordell, you're next.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you all for coming. My name's Talon Cordell. I'm not a Nebraska native. I moved here in 2015. There's a need for constitutional republic restoring in our state. We need to restore our Constitution in our state, and we need to have constitutionalism and individual liberties restored in our state. The real reason I'm running, I guess, is because it's time to stop crying about things and get off the couch and get up and do stuff, you know. And it takes people to put themselves out on the line and go ahead and do that. And you know, as far as the CRT in schools and stuff like that, that's a big issue we have going on in our schools. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in our schools that are destroying our kids and their lives. The same thing with the hypersexualized sex education they're doing. You know, the critical sex education, if you want to call it. It's a disgusting thing that are getting stuff down our kids' throat, and it's destroying humanity as it sits. That's taken away from their childhood. You know, they're trying to shove this stuff down the kids' throats in kindergarten and pre-K, and that's not right. And as a state, we should stand strong and stand firm and fight against that. Taxes are huge. Taxes for a lot of elderly people, you know, that lived on fixed incomes, they got to decide if they can pay their tax or sell their house, and that's not right. We need to get rid of that. We need to do this epic tax plan and get rid of our taxes that we have to have, that they have to have for our property. You never own anything, you just rent it. And that's not right. We need to fix this. We need to fix it now, and we need to fix it as fast as possible. Absolutely, it's going to take a lot of time. But you need to start somewhere. And the start is where we got to do it. And that's pretty much today. I thank you all for coming, and let's get this done.
Mr. Scott Shaver.
Hi, I'm Scott Shaver. I'm running because I listened to all the other candidates before I signed up and decided I needed to run. I didn't feel that everybody was being represented, and I felt we needed to fight down there, and anybody who knows me on city council knows I'm not scared to fight. So I want to stand up for the people and try to bring some common sense down to the legislature for a change. I'd like to support the epic tax. Hopefully it'll be through by the time I get there, so I won't have to. But we need to get that on the ballot so the citizens can actually vote for it. I'd like to introduce legislation to stop ESG, which is an environmental, social justice, and governance score, which is basically like the Chinese social credit scores. It's coming. It's affecting everybody. I recently lost my credit card company processing for my business because I'm a gun store. And so that hurts my ESG score, which hurts their score, which they try to pass on to me. So there's lots and lots of issues. I've got a whole bunch of really big ideas, and I've got them back on my flyers at my table, so you're welcome to go down the list and look at them. But I understand it has to be small steps. You can't just get your dream bill through, and I understand there's a lot of time when you have to sit in committees and listen to stuff and be patient. But I feel like we need somebody who can bring some common sense and actually push back against some of this stuff and actually work with people to get stuff accomplished for the citizens. Thanks.
Mr. Don Lees II. It should be on.
I'm Don Lees II from out in Banner County. Grew up, went to a little class 1 school called Reddington, which is actually in Morrill County. And we grew up in Morrill County, but I do live in Banner County at this point. Went to Banner County High School, graduated there, went off to work for a year, and then went to the University of Wyoming, where I met Mrs. Lease, who's in the audience back there. That's been a good thing in my life. We have 4 adult children now between the ages of 19 and 35. Successful children, I'll add. I think some of the things I'm concerned about, I am a 4th generation active rancher. I did just sell my cows last 3 weeks ago Monday. We were in the hackberry fire out there, so I'm not going to be able to graze the grass. It's not going to do it any good. So I chose to sell the cows. That was the difficult thing to do. Been calving cows since probably about 12 years old, and I'm 62 now, or almost 62. So it's going to be a real change in lifestyle. Yvonne actually is a public school teacher, works for Scottsbluff Public Schools in the elementary wing over on the west side. I think probably the 3 passions I have, the first is education. I'm greatly concerned, and I hear a lot of concerns about education. There are really 2 issues in education. One is the taxing side. How are we going to support public education? The other issue is, how do we help kids who need help? Our social fabric is designed around the public school, whether we like it or not. That doesn't mean everybody has to go there or everybody does. But that is what creates our society right now. That's what it's driven by. So we want to do the best, most efficient.
That's time, please.
Efficient job we can in education. All right,
Thank you. And Jeremiah Teeple.
Hello. I'm a little bit nervous here today because I'm not really a politician. But I am a citizen who's trying to stand up for the rest of you guys, and do what's right by the people of this district, whether you live in Kimball County, Banner County, or Scottsbluff County. I grew up in Lincoln. I went to Lincoln Pius High School and eventually went over to Central College in Pella, Iowa. And I spent some time working at the Lincoln Regional Center, which is where I met my wife. And so I got some hands-on experience with Health and Human Services and what direct care staff faces. And we're looking to really just make sure that people are represented. We've been doing a lot of learning on the fly here, finding out the issues that are important to Nebraskans so we can best represent the people that we're here to represent. Because the people on the east side of the state don't have the same agendas that we have out here on the west side of the state. And we need somebody who's going to stand up for people in this district at that state level. And we're finding ways that we can do that, and finding things that the people of this community care about, and just trying to do a lot of outreach right now. And we're planning on doing a few campaign stops in several different cities that we'll make some announcements on later this week. But I just wanted to kind of introduce myself so you guys know who I am and can kind of put a face to a name. And if there's any questions you guys have specifically about some issues, I'll be happy to answer all those, because I understand we're doing questions from the audience tonight. So thank you all for coming. I'm really happy that we have such a big engagement. It makes me really happy to see that there are people that do care about their communities and are willing to come out and support things like this for going on. I want to thank the Farm Bureau for putting this on. I think it's fantastic that they can get us out here so we can talk to you guys and you can communicate with us and share with us the things that are important to you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to our round of questions, 90 seconds each for each answer, and we will be starting with Talon Cordell. First question, what should be done to address rural workforce development and the related housing shortage?
All right, so there's been a few things that have been come through about the rural housing shortages and the proposals that they have for bringing in housing developments in the neighborhoods, and there's a lot of people that are against that, and there's a lot of developments that need to be done. As far as for the rural housing, there's a lot of buildings in our town, in our district, and in our state that are not even being occupied. They're being ran down. They're being let just sit there and rot into the ground. And they always want to build new stuff. Let's build new and shiny. Well, that used to be new and shiny too. So let's refurbish and rehabitat the stuff that we do have in our district and our communities. We need to work hard on making equal housing and fair housing for everybody so that it's affordable. Affordable housing is important. And that's pretty much where I stand on those.
Mr. Shaver?
Okay. My stance on it's a little bit different than most people. I don't feel it's the government's job to do that. I think the best thing we can do to help with it is to get the government out of the way. One of the things is the epic tax that we're trying to get on the ballot so that property tax goes away, so that we don't have people moving in and driving the prices up on the family ranch and then you having to sell it instead of your kids being able to take it over. I think when you actually put the use-based tax in like that, you actually encourage a lot of people to come here, and you encourage the builders to actually want to build because they don't have to put a lot of money in a house and then worry about paying the property tax on it because there is none. The one problem I do see with it is we may have a real flood of people to Nebraska, because if you can buy property in Nebraska and never pay tax again, well, yeah, that's the only problem I can see with it. And so that's going to be one of the biggest things, but I think if we can just get the government out of the way, that the people should be able to do it themselves. I don't think the government should be subsidizing stuff like that.
As far as rural workforce, what we need to do and what's occurring right now is a partnership between the community college up here and Scottsbluff Public Schools and other schools in the area. They're working to create programs that will train electricians, plumbers, carpenters, things like that, so that they can be a long ways down the road in that training. And also trying to get local partners who work in the building trades to employ these kids during the summer and strategically through the school year. So that will help to alleviate some of the strain on the workforce. And a lot of the training that they're going to receive is going to be in home building, just like I said, electrical, plumbing, carpenters, things like that. We don't have to limit it to that, but those are certainly some things that will work well. The housing issue is complicated because we don't necessarily want government doing all the housing. But sometimes you have to incentivize builders who don't want to take the risk because it's a darn risky time right now. So you can incentivize them by giving them partnerships where they put some money and some effort into the game, and the houses are financed in part by government at that time, but they're repaying the fund.
Time.
All right, so the question was the issues of rural workforce development and housing shortages.
Yes.
So I think it's really important that we do have quality rural workforce development because the communities out here, we're not living in an urban society out here. We don't have any big cities. So, we really depend on our farmers, our ranchers, and people that are handy with trades, mechanics, and people like that are really vital to our community and to our local economy. So I think that having those kind of trade programs are fantastic, and we need to find ways that we can expand that through state funding. But we also need to be careful because I think that property taxes have been too long tied to education funding. So we got to find ways to get that, find a way to separate that, because the reason we have such high property taxes is because we do care about our education system, and every time that we offer to raise it, it's because we want to support our education system. And it's because we care, but we've also just relied too heavily on it. But I agree that we need to get out of the way with government regulations and things as far as housing shortages go, and find ways to encourage homeowners as opposed to renters so that people feel more part of the community and are more likely to take care of their houses and things like that.
Mr. Harden?
As far as workforce goes, we're bleeding our young people. They leave here very rapidly. And unfortunately, I understand where they're coming from. They like opportunity. They like income. What a strange thing. And so we need to incentivize them to stay here. And so instead of relying on the government to get our young people to stay here, I think there are some creative ways that business owners can get young people to stay here. Maybe help them pay for their education in exchange for their time and their talent and their strong backs. I think there are also some opportunities where we can work with local businesses, not to take over all of the housing, but to once again incentivize it. It's not new to this area. When Great Western Sugar came here many years ago, Great Western helped participate in creating housing for people to live in. That has happened throughout the history of the United States. If you look at what happened in Summit County, Colorado, with the tunnels that were built, most of what happened in that county was the companies that were actually built the houses for the workforce. That's not the answer for everything, but it's another release valve. When I speak with local realtors and say, how many houses do we need in this area? Do we need hundreds? No. What would happen if we had a couple dozen? And they said it could start to move this market.
Thank you very much. Our next question, what can the state do to improve voter integrity? We start off with Scott Shaver.
It's pretty simple. Paper ballots. Smaller districts so they can actually be counted at the local place. They don't need to go anywhere. They can be filed, counted, and everything, and then the numbers can actually be sent over to the county clerk. Sorry. No machines, no electronics at all, 100% paper. And then they can, after they're counted and they're reported, then they can do pictures of those with unique identifiers on them, which will actually show that that ballot was this exact number of ballot. So you can keep track of them, and then they need to be available to the public to see so that nothing is hidden. We need to have people in the precincts making sure that there's no funny business going on. And we need to make sure before they start counting, they make sure that they've got all the ballots. There's no mystery boxes. There's no SUVs showing up with truckloads of ballots. I mean, if you keep the small ballots and you end up with more ballots than you have voters, there's a problem. Thanks.
Yeah, paper ballots are a good solution to that, most certainly. I think one of the things we need to do is have voter ID. I don't know how you know who's voting in an area where you don't know all the people. If you go out to Banner County, a lot of times you go out there and have a pretty good conversation with people waiting to take your ballot or giving you the ballot and then waiting. But that doesn't happen everywhere. There are people that move. We're a mobile society. So I don't see anything wrong. And I'm not talking about a driver's license. You can get a state ID card if that's what it takes. Those shouldn't cost anything either, by the way. They should be free to those people. But, you know, how is it that we require somebody to provide a birth certificate to get a driver's license, and we don't do that to vote? I think they're both equally important things that happen in our lives. So I think that might be the first step I'd want to support.
I really don't believe that voter IDs are really the answer to voter integrity across the state. Sometimes there's a lot of barriers to people receiving, different types of IDs. But, you know, you do have to prove who you are when you register to vote. And when you vote, you have to sign that it's you to validate it. So there shouldn't really be any issues as far as needing to provide an ID just to vote. But your signature, you know, is proof enough of who you are. There's a lot of other issues, though. You know, most of this is taken care of at the local level anyway. So I don't feel like state regulations are the way to go. Our communities have done a great job of making sure that our elections are valid in this community for a while. I don't have any doubt that there's been any voter fraud in this area, and I don't foresee it being a problem across the state of Nebraska that the state legislature needs to address at this point in time.
I do believe there needs to be voter ID. And the reason I believe that is because it's not just about what goes on in Nebraska. I do believe Secretary Evnen and that Nebraska has done a good job. Arizona had major problems. Pennsylvania had major problems. Metropolitan areas have major problems. And thankfully, ours did not have those kinds of challenges, but they could. It's the basic principle that you should be able to prove who you are in order to do your most sacred duty as a patriot. Plain and simple. Prove it.
Well, I'll go off what you said, sir, because I do believe in voter ID as well. Absolutely, 100%. You have to have ID to buy a house, open a bank account, buy tobacco, buy liquor, register your kids for school. But as Brian said, it is the most sacred thing that you can do is vote, and it should be secured. And at the state level, we absolutely should have voter ID, 100% all the way across. I agree in paper ballots, no machines whatsoever. Everything should be watermarked, counted, per district, per person. If they got 30,000 registered voters in that district, 30,000 ballots. We should limit the early voting and limit mail-in ballots. Of course, for the armed services, we give them mail-in ballots and let them vote and all that stuff early, but absolutely not. Nothing else, you know. And if people need help, I know somebody that has fraudulently filled out an elderly woman's ballot for her during the 2020 elections. It was wrong. I told her it was wrong. We got to stop that stuff. And it's a lot of nursing homes and stuff like that. It happens all the time in them. And we have to stop it. We have to send in either have ballots there, you know, have the polling place there at that nursing home to where we can get our elderly to be able to vote and we can get everybody's vote counted. But it has to be done proper and it has to be done all the way 100% certified. Thank you.
Time. Next question will be directed to Don Lease to start off with. Nebraska continues to have among some of the highest tax rates among all of our neighboring states. Do you support comprehensive tax reform, and if so, what would that form be?
Boy. Yes, we need the tax reform. There's been a lot of studies done across the state. There's been a lot of plans offered across the state. The most common one I think I'm aware of in terms of studies says that we ought to provide about a third and a third and a third. That means a third property tax for like schools, a third income tax, and a third sales tax. I think that's an achievable goal. There's been some talk, and we have somebody here that knows a lot more than I do about consumption tax. I don't have any problem with the consumption tax. I'm just not sure where that's going to end up. So what I'd like to see is I'd like to see us move towards taking a good portion of the public schools tax bill off of property tax. If we could get that, the total education tax, and that includes ESUs and the community colleges, down to about 30%, someplace in that area, then I think we can balance that out with an increase in sales tax and income tax. Just have to run the numbers on those. So I think that would be my plan.
So comprehensive tax reform, we absolutely support it. I think it's gotten kind of out of hand and ridiculous how much of our hard-earned dollars that we're paying to the government all the time. There's a lot of wasteful spending out there that just isn't really necessary. And there's a lot of programs out there that do need our support, so we have to be careful about which ones we're finding that we can cut from. But we absolutely have to find ways to get property tax relief to people so that homeownership becomes incentivized, especially on this end of the state. Having statewide property taxes done the way they are, it's almost a slap in the face having Wyoming right next to us with no property taxes. It's like, man, where's the incentive to even stay here, right? But there's a lot of things about Nebraska that are great that keep us here, and we do care about our communities, which is what does keep us here and keep us fighting for the things we do, believe in. So we got to find ways to get the property taxes lowered and like we said, taken off of being tied to the schools and education, and find ways to make sure that we do fund education because that's the future of our communities, is our youth, and making sure that they have those quality educations.
We do need comprehensive reform. We've been saying that like a broken record for about 7 decades here. And there have been really brilliant people that have been working on these problems, like Senator Stenner, like Senator Erdman. Lots of smart people have gone to Lincoln trying to fix these problems. This isn't new. For those of you who are not farmers, let me paint a picture for you. Imagine taking whatever your taxable income is. Take your taxable income. Take 50 to 60% of that taxable income. That is what farmers pay every year in property taxes. That's what they pay every year. It's absolutely debilitating. Now take that figure times 10 years or 20 years. That's what we're looking at. Corporate taxes in Nebraska are high. Individual taxes in Nebraska are high. We don't have estate taxes here, but we do have inheritance taxes. We whittled some of those away this fiscal or this year in the 107th legislature, but we still have those as well. So we have lots of challenges going on, and unfortunately, we've been making tiny incremental changes each year. In fact, there are more working their way through the legislature right now. And at the end of the day, they're going to be incremental.
Absolutely, we do need 100% tax reform in this state. We need tax reform across our country for all people of the country, but for this state, absolutely we do. The EPIC tax is a great start, and I believe it's a great start. And we don't know where it's going to end up or how it's going to get perverted along the way by other people that get in the office, you know. You don't know. So there should be protections in there. I'm for either abolishing the school board, the Board of Education, or reclaiming 100% of the oversight for all funds. Get rid of it, or give the oversight back to the legislature where it belongs. Property taxes, huge. We need to get rid of those. Sales tax. Well, the consumption tax is great. I like that part. But as far as anything else that's taxable should not be, you should pay it once. Like I said earlier, we are renting our houses. We're renting our vehicles from the government. That's not a way to be free. That's not a constitutional republic. That's what we live in our country. It's a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. And we need to restore that back. And we need to take our country back and take back the rights that we as people are given in the United States Constitution in the 10th Amendment. Thank you.
Well, I don't like the term comprehensive tax reform because it's been distorted all these years and everybody keeps saying they're going to do it and they never do. But absolutely we need what definition of comprehensive tax reform should be. We need to totally start over. It's so messed up it's not even funny. Our biggest spending is going to be health and human services and education, if I'm not wrong. They both are very, very administratively heavy, and we're also giving a lot of money to people who aren't even citizens. Those need to be fixed. That's spending. But as far as taxing, property tax, in my opinion, is theft. So it needs to go away. And the way to do that is through a consumption-based tax. It gets rid of property tax, income tax, corporate taxes, and inheritance tax as well. So it clears all of those out and it replaces it with one tax. And I think we need to get it on the ballot so that people can go ahead and vote for it, for a constitutional amendment. But it needs to be left back to the people instead of having all the people who are smarter than everybody else in the other end of the state making the decisions.
We'll move on to our next question, starting with Jeremiah Teeple. After taking office after the first 4 years, how would you define success?
So after first 4 years, success would look definitely like comprehensive tax reform, definitely. Making sure that people keep more of their own money. We're trying to build our communities up, find incentives for the private sector to step up and do the right thing and fill their role in the community by the contractors building, or whether it's whatever, getting banks involved with getting businesses going, finding incentives for new business owners to get entrepreneurs get their foot in the door and take ownership in their communities. So I'd like to see this room full next time completely and packed over the house. That would look like success to me, because that would show more community involvement. So again, I'm really thankful to everybody that did show up here today. But success would look like more citizens being involved in their communities and taking ownership and being proud to be a Nebraskan.
I think after 4 years, I would consider it successful if we were actually dependent on more of what we actually create in America and more of what we create in Nebraska. We're about to face some really tough times, mostly because the raw materials that we rely on as farmers for chemical, for fertilizer, for herbicides, for pesticides, come largely from Russia. There's a great beauty of a place to do business with, as well as with China. And so thankfully, Canada is firing up more of what it is producing in that way. But after 4 years, I would like to see not only what happens for the ag world in that way, but across all industries. I would like to see a lot more made in Nebraska, as well as a lot more made in the USA happening in our homes. What would happen if we each walked through our home and we said, tomorrow we need to strip everything out of it that has a Made in China sticker on it? What would be left in your house? Have you thought about that? What would be left in your house if secondarily it was everything else made somewhere else? We need to return the strength of America, which historically has always been standing on our own 2 feet, making our own stuff. That's what I would consider a success.
Well, to me, a success would be after the first 4 years, we'd have constitutional carry open or concealed. We'd have property taxes gone. We'd have voter ID. We'd have voter integrity. We'd have ES&S and Dominion machines kicked the hell out of our country and absolved. We'd have individual rights and liberties for our people, for the people of this state. That's what 4 years would look like of being in there and doing something. Enough of the pandering and giving back and forth. Just put yourself aside. You're there to serve you're there to serve the people of your district, the people of your state. Put yourself aside and serve them. And if success would also look like coming home from session and actually people being happy that you're home. Not just a couple people, all the people. Because you done good when you were there.
Well, he just saved me a minute and 30 because he pretty much covered most of it. So I'll go with what he said, but let's also go with let's try to be Vegas. What happens in Nebraska stays in Nebraska. Let's keep our stuff here instead of sending it to China and bringing the Chinese stuff in here. We grow it right. We make healthy food. Let's start taking care of our own people first, and then we can send it out other places. We can have an equal to inspection system so that we don't have to rely on the USDA letting us do what they say we can do. And then we can use a system like South Dakota and 7 other states have, where we can actually trade interstate with those different states the products that we produce, like the meat and ag and stuff, without the government getting involved in it, the federal government. Success to me is small things, because when I was on city council, I couldn't measure my success weekly. All I could do is slow down the nightmare. I was one guy. I was against 4, sometimes 3, but still 3 can push anything through. But I did get, by the end of my thing, I got the mask mandate blocked in Scottsbluff, and that to me was a success. I'd like to get that done legislatively so nobody can ever do that to us again. Freedom is what I would see as success.
There you go.
I think a lot of times success to me is measured one person at a time. If anybody thinks they're going to go to Lincoln, Nebraska, they need to, and change, radically change things, they probably need to talk to two guys sitting in this room. It's unlikely to happen. It's not impossible. All things are possible. So when I say I want to change things one person at a time, we have kids in public schools who are suffering from anxiety, other mental illnesses. We have people on our streets every day that are suffering from anxiety and mental illnesses. It might be easy to think, well, why should I help them, or why should we pay for their problems? But I'm here to tell you their problems are our problems. We need to think of ways that we can creatively get them off the streets to help them become productive citizens. This is not just about throwing money away. We got to have a goal at the end when we help people. So I think the defining success that I would see is we've helped people and we haven't spent a whole lot more money. We've got to be efficient about everything we do. The other side of that tax rate deal is to reduce spending. And how do you reduce spending and help people? Well, there are ways to do that. I think there's some unique programs that I could suggest involving peer-trained people who can go out into the streets, into the schools, and help parents be better parents, people be better people.
Thank you. Next question will be directed to Brian Harden. Do you believe the legislature is doing enough to cut spending? If yes, how so? And if no, what else would you cut?
I think the legislature has done an amazing job. Senator Stinner has chaired the Appropriations Committee for the last 6 years. He has tried to hold them at 2%. It's probably not made him very popular there. And he's done a good job of holding the line on that. In speaking with a number of senators, Senator Erdman, Senator Halloran, Senator Lowe, Senator Albrecht, and a number of others, they talk about, as senators, how much more difficult, frankly, it is when you have times of surplus than when you don't have anything. Because when you don't have anything, the job's easier. The answer is no, period. When you have a lot, for example, this last $1 billion that came in from Arpa, I believe the requests were $4.5 billion for that $1 billion that came in. And so tougher decisions have to be made. I look ahead and go, oh my goodness, we now have a public, as well as all kinds of divisions of government, that have it in their blood that you can go ask for something. And so the next legislature gets to say no a whole bunch compared to what is going on right now. And so I think a lot of good things have happened. I respect the hard decisions they've had to make. There's going to be a lot tougher ones, I think, tough ones coming down the line as well.
So I feel they've done a pretty decent job at cutting spending, or at spending. But there are things that we can cut. There's bureaucracies out there that are just pet projects of previous politicians that were there to better themselves and gain. There's many things that can cut, many little projects that have been pushed around and cut. We should be spending more money on fixing the roads and streets that we've been taxed on already than building new $8 million walkways that are very seldomly used. I'm talking about the one over here. Yeah. The other one. Yeah. So there's a lot of cutting, there's a lot of tax cuts or cuts that could be done in spending. There's a lot of savings you could do on shaving on top. I mean, it's not really hard to understand that when the same people get the same contracts, do the same crappy job, and they still get the same contracts, where's that money going? So there's some things that could be cut. There's a lot of things that could be cut as far as spending, and it's a lot of it's special projects. Thank you.
Okay. I think that they have done a good job of shrinking the growth. I don't think they've cut. I think they've shrunk the growth. It's not growing as fast as it was, but when I decided to do this, I started watching the legislature. It's insane. I'm thinking to myself, what did I sign up for? You get people standing there talking about stuff that has nothing to do with anything, just to waste time. Could we just say, okay, they get their 4 minutes, all these people get their 4 minutes, we're going home early because we're not going to sit here and listen to these morons all day. Which isn't nice, I'm sorry. But it's true. I think the biggest way we can cut spending is to cut the bureaucracies in education and health and human services, and to also stop giving money to people who aren't citizens of the state of Nebraska. Those are going to be huge. I think, like I said, they have shrunk spending, but they also have all the Arpa money, most of which went to Omaha and Lincoln, because apparently the people who were living off the government had it harder than people who actually lost their jobs and lost their farms and had to throw their crops away. I guess their monthly paycheck and the free extra money and the free food wasn't enough. So the ARPA money went to them. So I think we need to start being like Terry Carpenter and fighting for our area.
It must be agonizing to go to Lincoln and have to be responsible for deciding whose programs are going to survive and whose are going to get cut. There are some ways, I'm not telling anybody in the audience that doesn't know this or any of these guys, where we could create efficiencies in our public service sector. And I'm thinking about social services. We got a lot of, in my observation, there are a lot of people who may be doing a good job, but they're doing the same thing in the same community, and they don't talk to each other about it. So we've got groups that if we could just coordinate their services, at least we could make them more efficient. We may not be able to save a lot of tax money in terms of that. I mean, we got 7-8% inflation this year. Do you think anybody in the state level is not going to ask for an increase in their wages? They're going to. Do you want highways? What do you want to cut? Highways, education, social services, mental health, you know. They all can be made efficient, but we don't have those services because they're not needed for the most part. They may not be efficient in the way they're operated. And I think that might be part of the solution that I have is the peer groups. You know, if we can create, those are better than McDonald's jobs, but not licensed mental health providers or
Time. Go ahead,
engineer
Mr.
jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Lees.
Well, when you're in the legislature and you got the power of the purse, you're never really doing enough to cut spending, are you? No one's ever really going to be happy no matter how hard you try. But it's the tough job that you got to do when you get sent there, is to find a way to balance the budget and find creative ways of funding things that are important to the communities and making sure that we're not cutting from things that are going to affect the people of our community. But you also have to, be willing to compromise with people across the state. So we have to work with, people from Omaha and Lincoln who have their pet projects out there, and they're very influential in the way they want to ask for their funding and get those projects pushed through. And sometimes we can feel kind of underrepresented that, our tax dollars are going to projects in Omaha and Lincoln. But the truth is, Omaha and Lincoln is a great part of our state. And even though there's a big difference between the lifestyles that we live out there, we live out here and that they have out there, we're still all Nebraskans, and we still have to find ways to make sure that we're being responsible with our spending and at least having a balanced budget, even if it's hard to do.
Our next question, Mr. Cordell. We currently have an excess of state revenues, both from state taxes as well as funding from the federal government through ARPA. What ideas do you have as the best ways to spend those funds?
Well, it's going to be a short answer. Put it back. We're facing hard times. The state's going to face some serious hard times. What, you just got money, you got to spend it? What, you forget personal finance when you go to be a legislator or a mayor or anything like that? Put that money back. Put it aside for the hard times. If you save for hard times, the hard times won't be as bad as they were. They would be if you didn't save. Put the money back. Save that money.
along the same lines again, like he was saying, the money that we have that's ARPA money has very specific guidelines you have to use to spend it on. You can't just hold it. It has to be spent by a certain time. So you use that money for the items that are otherwise budgeted so that you can put that money back. The other end of it is you need to have a reserve so that you can handle it in hard times. And once you get to that certain level that you have, give it back. It's not your money. It's your money. So everybody who paid in money, not everybody who didn't pay. If you didn't pay in money, you don't get any back. But if you paid in money, you get it back.
Said on a conference call today talking just about this very subject. They were asking why the governor vetoed the $150 million for our money, essentially, that was targeted to help reimburse people who couldn't afford to pay their rents and their heating bills and their electric bills. Is it our money? Well, if we don't spend it, somebody will. But I don't know if that's a good reason to do it. If I were going to spend it, I would spend it on helping people. I think it's difficult, and I'm sure they can't spend that on buildings and stuff like that. It has to be spent directly. But I would want to do it carefully so that we didn't cause people to feel entitled to that kind of money, because it's not coming around again. If we don't quit giving money to people and making them feel entitled, we're never going to get out of this problem, because there's plenty of those out there already. It's a difficult deal. I don't know whether the legislature is going to override it or not. I doubt it. I think there were 4 votes short, if I understood. And I'm not saying that people don't need it, but one of the reasons it never got spent is because they never lowered or raised, as it would be, the standard to actually help the people it was intended to help.
Time.
So the question is how we would spend excess state revenues.
Mm-hmm.
If we have excess state revenues, it's obvious that we're taxing our people too much. And when we have a pretty universal theme that a lot of people feel like we're being kind of taxed out of existence, or we're losing all the money that we're working super hard for, and our state's sitting here with excess funding trying to figure out how to spend it, I think we need to find ways, like they said, to give it, not just give it back to the people, but provide some of that relief on our taxes, and find ways for those excess funds that we do need to spend to be reinvested in communities across the state, so that we can continue to grow and build those things and businesses within those communities, so that we have that sense of community and citizenship.
You know how it is when you sit down with the family and you play Monopoly? There's a tremendous sense of freedom in that game, isn't there? Because you know it's not real. This money is not real. And so for a lot of people, they look at it and go, I guess I'm going to play it like I play Monopoly. Okay, if we're going to play Monopoly, one of my concerns is, let's put any excess funds towards agriculture. Here again, we're going to be facing some very hard times, because it does not look like, I want to just remind you, we're about 1.5 years into this current administration. There's more of it left. We're going to continue to hockey stick what is going on with inflation for a very long time. And so our farmers are going to need help. Did you know, if you go to the FDA website and you look at the years, they take these 5-year averages. The newest one should be coming out pretty quick. But from 2012 to 2017, just in Scottsbluff County, do you know how many farmers we lost in those 5 years? About 21%. They didn't disappear from the earth, and the farm ground is still being farmed, but it was absorbed into larger farms. We're losing the proprietary knowledge of farming. Let's invest in that.
Our next question with Mr. Shaver. This one is for you. What are your views on criminal justice reform and building a new prison?
To be perfectly honest, I don't know the condition of the prison. I've been told it's needing to be replaced. Not sure how bad it is, but without knowing that, I can't really tell you. As far as criminal justice reform, I know they're looking at different ways that they can try to get some of the less violent people out and try to reduce the population and stuff. Another thing that's been circulating around in Lincoln is, I don't know if it's new or just because I've been there, I've seen it, getting rid of the death penalty. And that's a really touchy subject for people, especially people from this area that have seen some of the horrific things that the people have done that have gotten the death penalty down there. I think that we need to really seriously look at things, but if we're going to get rid of the death penalty, then we need to stop paying extra to keep them protected from the rest of the prison. They need to just go into general population. It's ridiculous for us to pay 3 times for a child killer to keep them safe once they're in prison and pay for all their appeals that they do for the rest of their lives. So I think there is something that needs to be done. I am not an expert on it at any means, so I would actually have to do some research to get the right answer.
So I would guess, and this is just a guess, that a significant number of people that we have incarcerated in the state of Nebraska, and I'm guessing that's 90%, have either substance abuse disorder or mental health issues, or both, because they tend to go together. One of the things we need to be doing to help the prison system, and I'm not against building a prison if we need one, but we ought to be thinking about how we're rehabilitating people. If we can increase or decrease the recidivism, the amount of repeat offenders who appear in jails, then we've accomplished something. And I'm going to be honest with you, those numbers aren't high. Even with good programs, you still have a lot of folks that go back out and reoffend. But again, it's just one person at a time. We gotta think that way. It costs what, $180 or $200 a day to have somebody down here in the Scottsbluff County Jail. $60,000, $70,000 a year to put them in the penitentiary in Nebraska. So let's just talk about the jail. If we keep one kid, if we help one kid in public education with mental health care and substance abuse counseling or prevention, we're saving $180 a day. That kid's not going to be in jail. How much money can we spend to help those people? Just from a compassion standpoint, it ought to be something to be able to help them. But think of it as a bank. Every kid that doesn't have those kind of issues saves you money.
Yeah, I think there does need to be criminal justice reform in the state of Nebraska. We got to consider, like they said earlier, that there's a high rate of people that are, when they're released from prison, they do end up going back into the system. And we need to find ways to, reintegrate people when they've served their time and find ways to make sure that they're ready to be out into the communities and we're not just setting people up for failure once they've just done their time. So I think we need to find ways to have programs and maybe invest money instead of having building new prisons, invest that money into programs that are going to prevent people from needing to go to prison. I also think we need to look at, like you said, reforming our policies on nonviolent drug offenders. We treat a lot of people with, sex offender problems way more lenient than we do nonviolent drug offenders, and it ends up creating criminals stuck in the system as opposed to finding ways to, make them part of our community.
I've served as a prison chaplain. I've served as a police chaplain in major metropolitan areas. I can tell you that one of the challenges is what's happening on the front end of that, and that is mental health. We end up with a lot of people who probably don't fit the bill for getting to go off as a felon. They haven't earned it yet, and unfortunately we don't have a system, particularly in western Nebraska, for where we put a young person who's making bad decisions. and we don't know where else to put them. Sheriff Overman and I talked about this subject for quite a while. Our jail often gets rather full with young people, and we don't know where else to put them. And the big problem isn't that they have committed a crime, but they might not be safe to themselves or someone else. And so they end up going to our jail because there's not an open spot for them to be on the other end of the state. Those kinds of situations can escalate, and we end up filling up our prison eventually with young people who, frankly, haven't sinned big enough to end up there. We have a broken system, and it's not speaking to all of the issues with the kind of equity that it needs. Now, believe me, I'm not suggesting we pull guilty felons out and put them on the street. We simply need to reform what we've got.
When it comes to criminal justice reform, I believe there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of, as everybody here has stated, there's a lot of people that have, nonviolent offenders that are going to jail, and a lot of children or kids that are going to jail that don't get a chance. They get it put in there, and they get put with who knows who they're roomed with that day or that week or that month or that they're there. And that's wrong, because that changes their outlook on things. That's an influence on them. So for justice reform, nonviolent drug offenders, absolutely, I'm in on that. Especially when it comes to marijuana. I understand that marijuana is, you know, this gateway drug supposedly and all that stuff, but really, the methamphetamines in this town alone, holy crap! You see it every day. But then you see them out back on the streets 2 days later because we don't have any place to put them. Same thing with a sex offender. They get 3 years for molesting a child. That's wrong. So there's a lot of things. As far as a prison goes, I'm like I said, I'm in for rehabilitating older buildings if they're able to be rehabbed. If not, then, and if it's going down the drains all the way, then we got to trash it. But don't put a frickin' donut shop in it like they have over in Torrington. They're in prison.
Time.
Pay your price.
Mr. Lees, what are your thoughts about the expansion of horse racetracks and casino gambling?
Well, a lot of people see gambling as a solution to tax issues. That's not going to happen. They bring their own issues along when you have gambling. Sometimes they can be fairly significant. We have people that get addicted to gambling. We have more sex trafficking. We have more drugs. All those things come along with that. Does that mean I'm opposed to a horse track and gambling? No. I think that needs to be a local community decision. And I think there will be safeguards, I hope, at the state level in place to make sure that everyone goes through that process and makes that decision as a community. Once that's done, you know, they're going to have to deal with extra law enforcement, roads, bridges, sewer, water, all those things. They add significantly to it, and they don't always bring the best people. They're not always bad either. So I guess the bottom line is I think that needs to be a local community decision within the framework that the legislature decides, which basically they've got that framework in place right now. I think they're going to spend, what do we got, till 25 to actually look at that and make the rules. So.
Oh, as far as the state legislature goes and horse racing and tracks in Gering and casino gambling, personally, I'm not a big gambler. I'd rather spend my money than throw it away. But I also understand that it can draw tourism, and people tend to take vacations out in Deadwood and things like that because they have a good time doing these sort of things. And it draws businesses along with the casinos. it's not just the casino that creates the business. There's other attractive businesses that go along with that and go along with tourism. So I think it's a good idea, and I'm excited to see the excitement that the horse tracks are going to bring to Gering. And I agree with Don. I think it's a local decision, and there needs to be a framework for the states essentially to stay out of the business of the local communities, so that the local communities can decide what's best for them. And as far as the horse tracks goes, I'm fully in support of it and the community going forward with it.
What happens if you take $4 million and divide it by 150 jobs annually? What is that? $30,000 a year per job. How many more of those would you like to have available locally to go with the 52,000 jobs that are already available that we cannot fill in Nebraska? I've watched what happened in Colorado with cash-based businesses, both with limited stakes gambling in Cripple Creek and Black Hawk and Central City, and as well as the pot industry. Those are cash-based businesses. Let me tell you what, organized crime absolutely loves cash-based businesses wherever they can find it and in whatever measure they can get it. You can get cash-based businesses and you're going to get everything that comes with it.
I'm not for a horse racing and gambling in local, in a tight-knit town. Put it out on the outskirts, put it outside of the city limits, put it out somewhere else. And sure, they're going to have to pay for their own permitting and their own sewer and their own water and all this other stuff. That's fine. But as Mr. Lee said, I agree with him 100%. It's going to bring all sorts of trafficking. You know, the Super Bowl is the world's largest sex trafficking event in one day. I'm not saying that a horse racing park and all this stuff is going to bring the world's largest to Gering, but we already have a big enough problem in this community of sex offenders. Holy smokes. Bringing in gambling, and, well, that's going to bring in more booze, too. And I'm not against booze by any means, but it's going to bring in gambling, it's going to bring booze, it's going to bring in bad riffraff, then the taxes aren't going to go to anything, you know. They're going to, it's all special needs. I wouldn't do it, and I also agree that it is a local level if the community wants it. Let the people vote for it.
This one's a tough one. I've been to a lot of local political meetings, and the politicians that are getting money from this are pretty excited about it. They're looking at it as a payoff. You know, the money coming in. It's going to be great. We're going to have all this extra money and all the rest of it. I personally am not into gambling. From the freedom side, I don't think that we should really limit what people can do, which hurts me to say because I think it does hurt communities often, and I don't really want to hurt our community. But I think if it's handled correctly at the local level, it can be done correctly, and it can be a positive. And you can bring more jobs in, you can bring more tourism in and everything else. It's just one of those things that I'm not personally comfortable doing, so I would not have voted for it. But if I get into the legislature, then I would try to put the limitations on it to restrict stuff as much as I could so that it was run the right way.
The question for Mr. Teeple: how much say should parents have in the development of curriculum and other school issues impacting their child's education?
I think it's really important that parents, we strongly encourage our parents to step into a greater role in their education of their children. It's super important to the educators to feel like they have a working relationship with the parents, but it's also important that the parents have personal decision making as well. So I guess to put it bluntly, I think that parents should have the most say ultimately over what their child's education is, whether that be homeschooling or deciding which school their child attends. local school boards and whatnot also are, we elect those, so they're very reliable. They're supposed to be people we can trust, so if we're involved in our communities, electing people we can trust, we should go ahead and trust them. But also have parents who are involved in the communities and with their schools and the education, so that we have the best outcomes for our children.
Perhaps we should thank CRT for waking us up so that we can get re-involved in our children's lives, because I think that's been the net effect. CRT, critical race theory, for those of you who are not familiar with it, essentially is if you wanted to script the best possible way to create racial division, that does it. And secondarily, parents really need to be involved. And it's created that amazing need for parents to get involved. If we're going to shrink government, one of the best ways to do it is at the local level, and for parents to be involved in those interactions with teachers, with their school board, with the superintendent, and that entire infrastructure for education. Parents, it's not optional equipment. We have to be involved with all of it. We have to flip through the books. Last year was an interesting thing over the last 2 years, wasn't it? Because one of the silver linings of COVID is it gave parents an opportunity to see what was going on in the classroom, because they could look through the computer screen and go, you have got to be flipping kidding me. Really? And so we probably would have been blind to it for a much longer period of time had it not been for this massive inconvenience that struck us all. We have to be involved.
Very well said, sir. I agree. Parents have to be involved. You have to. The schools didn't have the kids. You had the kids. They're your kids. Why are you sending your kids to have them indoctrinated there? Why not be involved and absolutely say, no, the CRT, CSE stuff, critical sex education, just ridiculous. So parents should be involved 100% in the curriculum, in the schools themselves. It's the parents. Everything starts at home. Your child's influence starts at home, not at the school. And you should take that influence of your home to the school, because we pay for that school, right? It's our schools. We pay the salaries. We pay the taxes. That's ours as parents, as grandparents, as taxpayers. Those are ours. And the kids need to be brought up with morals and ethics. And what's being taught in our schools today have zero morals, zero ethics, and no values whatever. Thank you.
Parents absolutely need to be involved. The problem after talking with teachers is most parents aren't involved. They drop their kids off, they pick their kids up. They don't ask what's going on, they don't have good communication. I was blessed to have a child who I communicated with extremely well. Anything that was ever said in class that struck her wrong, she told me. I don't see any of her teachers in here, so I can say they probably hated me, but I knew what was going on in the classroom at all times. And the curriculum should be based on the basics, math, English, reading, but when you start getting into social emotional learning, is their code word for sex education now, or CRT, or any of the other acronyms they come up with, you're just damaging these kids beyond repair. And I think one of the answers to this is school choice. But not school choice by the way it's been talked about with vouchers and everything else. You need to look at the total cost, take all the students in the entire state, divide it equally, including all administration costs. And every penny of that money follows the student wherever they go, be it a private school, be it homeschool, any place they want to go, but it needs to be 100% paid. And then the administrations won't be pushing this stuff.
Parental and school responsibilities. I dealt with this back in the late 90s. Rocky, do we still have an Americanism committee on each board? Yep, okay, so their responsibility was to review the history textbooks, the history series in the public school and make sure they were consistent with the values that the school districts had. I don't know how well they do that. We took that pretty seriously. We actually looked at it. We read through it. We had conversations. That is the responsibility of a school board. That's your first line of defense in a public school. Second line of defense is parents talking to the school board and talking in the right way to your administration. Okay? You have to be a responsible parent. Probably 2/3 of the kids that reach public school now don't know their alphabet, don't know how to be quiet, don't know how to be socially appropriate. It'd be nice if we had some parents that would step up in that responsibility. In my last 30 seconds, I will never, as long as I am in the legislature, vote for anything that does away with the right for a parent to homeschool their kid or to put them in private school, nor do I want to support compulsory education 0 to 5. Colorado's looking at that right now. I don't know if that bill passed or not, but it ain't happening in my watch.
Time's running a little bit short, so we're going to move on to our lightning round. We're going to do this one a little bit differently than has been done at previous Farm Bureau forums. I'm going to ask all of the candidates to stand, because these are yes, no, in favor of, against questions. We're going to start off with you, Mr. Harden. Helmet law, keep or repeal?
Repeal.
Go ahead and answer down the line, gentlemen.
Repeal.
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 Red flag law, Mr. Cordell?
Repeal.
Should never happen. It's totally unconstitutional.
No due process is involved.
Repeal.
Medical and or recreational marijuana, for or against, one or both? Starting with you, Mr. Shaver.
Gotcha. Okay. I actually think it's a gateway, so I'm actually against both of them.
It's more than a gateway. It's a disaster waiting to happen to legalize marijuana. This ain't your old boy ditch weed. This is some real stuff. It causes real problems in people and in kids in a lot of ways you can't imagine.
Next.
4.
Against.
For medical.
Mr. Lees, favorite elected official?
I'm sorry.
Favorite elected official?
Current or past?
Your choice.
Favorite elected official. You know what? I'm kind of partial to school boards. I guess that's not a single person, but school boards. I've worked with a lot of county boards. I like them pretty well, too.
Next.
All right. Current, probably Thomas Massey from Kentucky. Ever, Dr. Ron Paul.
I prefer his son.
Talon?
Oh, here's a shocker, Trump. But before him, Reagan.
100% Reagan. Battery died.
We'll grab that.
Reagan.
There we go. Mr. Teeple, constitutional carry.
Absolutely.
I'm absolutely for it, along with Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground.
Same response as Mr. Harden. Absolutely for it. Castle Doctrine, stand your ground, open or concealed.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal yours and ruin it. Okay, I'll give you a campaign donation. 100% for all three of them.
Yeah, and I think I would be 100% for all three of them, too.
Mr. Harden, inheritance and death taxes.
Inheritance tax should experience a death tax.
I concur.
Both unconstitutional.
I'm dying to pay it.
Repeal.
Mr. Cordell, pro-life, pro-choice.
Pro-life, 100%.
Pro-life from conception.
Pro-life.
Pro-life except in circumstances of the mother's health.
Pro-life.
And Mr. Shaver, the death penalty.
So
And that's a
I went through this one
complicated one, I
before.
know.
Yeah, thanks. I'm for it, but I can see the reasons against it. It just needs to be done right.
Absolutely for it in the cases set forth by the state of Nebraska.
Repeal.
I'm for it.
I'm for it, and the execution should be public. It'll hinder some people from doing some stupid stuff in the future.
Gentlemen, go ahead and take a seat. We're going to move on to our 3-minute closing arguments for all of the candidates. We're going to start off with Mr. Don Lease II.
3 minutes.
You get
to
3
sum it
minutes.
up. Okay. Sometimes I can come across, because I believe in helping people, like I want to spend everybody's money. I don't. One of my standard axioms is I can spend my money better than anybody else in the world. That's an economic theory. That doesn't mean that I'm against paying taxes that are reasonable, that are fairly spread about by the entire tax base. Property tax is just about as bad as the inheritance tax. Not quite. It's close. It's not based on the ability, at least in agriculture, to pay. It's not based, if you're 65 on a fixed income, it's not based on ability to pay. Okay, if you're getting $700 a month in Social Security, your valuation's going up, your mill levy's going up, pretty soon you're paying a lot of tax. We do have some mitigations for that. As far as the schools go, I think that's where it's at. I think it's at with our youth. We need to pay a lot of attention to what's going on with our youth, not only in the 5 to 18-year age range, but what's going on below that. We have a significant set of circumstances that are growing, which is single-parent child raisers, single-parent mothers, probably not too many single-parent dads. One of the things that'd be nice is if those dads would be made responsible. That's a really hard thing to do. But we need to reach out and help those folks, because each one of those parents that we help successfully is going to increase the likelihood of the chances that kid not needing more help further down the line. That's a good investment. Investing in children is always a good investment. We have to do that efficiently. It's not free. Okay, it's just not going to be free. But the cost of not doing it is going to continue to degrade our society, because they a lot of times get to high school age, drop out, they become our homeless people, they become our abusing drug addicts, things like that. We need to do all we can to help that, and that includes drug prevention, mental health, pre-K. Again, I do not support compulsory pre-K education. If the state's going to pay for any part of that, I don't think it should be the public school who's footing the bill. I think it should be Department of Health and Human Services. I don't know if the money's there for that either, but it's better than letting the property taxpayers do it. So
And give you a couple of seconds just to go ahead and finish your thought, because that is time.
Well, yours is loud. We need to encourage parents to be responsible. We need responsible society. That includes voting. That includes being good parents. That includes not abusing drugs and things like that.
Time.
All right. Thank you.
Closing statements. All right. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate your civic involvement and just being here to hear what everyone has to say, and it shows that you care about who represents you at the state level and goes to Lincoln, and I think that's great. That's part of what our campaign's about, is just reaching out to grassroots level, building relationships with individuals, and letting you guys know that you're going to have somebody that does care about you, that goes to Lincoln if you choose to elect me. We've also got a lot of outreach programs. We're trying to find out more and more about what's important to you guys within the community, not just in Scottsbluff County, but also in Banner and Kimball County, because those needs are different. And so we need to make sure that we understand that we're representing all three of those counties when we're going there, and we're not just having too much of a focus in one or the other, or in one area, but need to make sure that everybody feels involved in the process, whether that's reaching out to the younger generation. There's not too many out here. I was hoping to see some more, but I'm encouraged that we've had some people from some civics classes reach out to us, and it shows me that people in our education system are doing their part and getting people involved, getting our high school students involved, even if they can't vote. It's fantastic that they're being part of the process and they're being taught how it works, because that's how we grow responsible citizens in our communities, is by making sure they understand how things work. So, we're looking at finding ways to expand the private sector and make sure that people are involved in the growing of our communities, and that the government can get out of the way and stop being so heavy-handed with our taxes, and let the people keep more of their own money and make their own decisions with their own money, or even with their education, because it's not up to the government to be a big brother to all of us. I think we all know what we want in our lives, and we should have the freedom to pursue it, whatever that looks like to us, as long as we don't harm others. And going to a state legislature, we're trying to understand that we're not going to micromanage communities. We're not going to micromanage the cities and the county governments. We're taking on the bigger, broader issues that affect the entire state. And that's what we're going to continue to focus on, and build those relationships with people that these issues affect. So thank you again for being here and for listening to us. I'll talk a lot here tonight, but you guys are great.
I'd like to thank Farm Bureau for the opportunity for all of us to get up and talk. And we look forward to hearing more from you. I would like to just tell you, I'd like to thank some folks. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started a number of different businesses. Some of them have done okay. Some of them have not been fit to line a parrot's cage, okay? They didn't work out at all, but that's part of that process. I have met just outstanding entrepreneurs from this area, from each county. People who have taken risks, who have tried ideas. That takes courage, and that's what we have here. You know what? We've got the lowest unemployment in Nebraska, and this is the leader of the 93 counties right here, okay? And that's amazing. You know what else is amazing? We also have the best labor participation rate in the history of the United States at the same time. If you're a company and you're not looking for employees from western Nebraska, what is the matter with you? Okay? You're exceptional. You really are. And also just wanted to say there are a few other things that we didn't talk about tonight that I would like to see happen in our legislature. We really need to streamline what happens with licensing. I'm not saying skip it, but everything from tradesmen who are licensed in another state. Of course, we have the situation with Mike Byer and what happened with him. Here's a guy who's a decorated war veteran who's an electrician from the military who was going to take years to get going with his electrical credentialing. Are you kidding me? We entrusted him with the Navy SEALs, but we can't trust him to fix a light bulb here. Those are the kind of things that need to be fixed, but it also happens in the healthcare sector. We need to streamline that for nurses and doctors. I'm not saying bring them in without a process. Streamline the process. Make it minutes and minutes, not years and years. They'll catch on pretty quick. They're sharp. Same way with teachers. We need teachers. And guess what? There's a bunch of them here, and we've made an exception for military spouses. We need to do that for other educators as well. We need to streamline what goes on with licensing in our state. Additionally, just wanted to say, a lot of these tax issues are really challenging. It's not a question of should we make it all better. It's tough to wrestle with. One of the bridges is to be able to get a good job online from here. Thankfully, we've got good companies working to that end.
Time.
I'd like to start off and say thank you to Farm Bureau for putting this on and letting us get up here and have a conversation and answer your questions. That's the really most important thing that we as potential elected officials can do is answer your questions and talk to y'all. And it shouldn't stop then. You know, it shouldn't stop on election day. It should continue on. I'll cover on a few things as well that we didn't really get onto and didn't have time to cover. When it comes to schools and even building the rural workforce, you know, they don't have welding classes very often anymore around here. They don't have shop class. They don't have carpenter class. You know, our kids aren't being taught real world things, real world experiences. They're going to come out of school and use their Chromebook to do something. How about using your hands? How about being able to fend for yourself and do for yourself? Another one is this SARS-CoV-2. I won't call it COVID because COVID's a nickname for it that they scared everybody with. SARS-CoV-2 and the mask and vaccine mandates around here, you still go to the hospital. You can't even go to the hospital without having to put a dang muzzle on your face. It's wrong. They're denying treatment around here for that. That's wrong. And that should be stopped. It should have been stopped. We should have our governor should have stopped it all the way. And he didn't do it. And, well, we got a new one coming up anyway, so that's fine. So I'm a constitutional conservative. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in the Constitution of the United States of America, and I believe that our state constitution should mimic that. And it should be the enumerated powers to the federal government, and as per the 10th Amendment, the rest of the powers and rest of the powers go to the states and the people. Well, the states seem to forget about the people. Let's bring the people back into it. I believe that Nebraska can be a beacon of constitutional rights and individual liberties that other states look to and strive to be like. We should be that state. That will bring jobs here. That will bring people here. That will bring economy here. That'll keep our kids coming back and staying in going to college, fine. But they'll come back here because they'll have the freedoms and the rights that they need to survive and strive. That's what it needs to be. We have to give the people back the power and take it back from the government because they're not our big brother. They are just there to do their jobs, not to put their thumb on our heads. Thank you all. I appreciate you all coming out tonight.
Once again, I'll pick up where he left off. Good job. Yeah, I like it. But freedom is absolutely the key, and I think we need to step up and give the people back their freedoms because the government has grown and grown, and it just continues to grow. If there's nothing in place to stop it, it will continue to grow. We need to. The reason I'm running is so that I can try to get the government to be smaller from inside the government. I don't know how many have tried to shrink the government from the outside, but it doesn't work. As a Dillon's Rule state, we do actually legislatively micromanage the cities. They can't do what we don't tell them they can do. That should change. We need a Senate so that we actually have representation that's equal instead of having Omaha and Lincoln keep taking our districts away from us. I mean, there's so many different things. It's just unbelievable how big they get. We need to protect our kids, like I said before. We need to really support a tax that gets rid of the property tax, and we need to get rid of the income, inheritance, and business taxes as well, because that in itself is going to drive businesses. That's how the government creates jobs, because the government can't create jobs. It's not their job. Being born here, lived here my entire life, and I got a fairly good idea what most of the people in the area think. Obviously, not everybody. We all have different opinions. But one thing that I do have is I'm very approachable. If anybody has anything to talk to me about or any questions, you're welcome to come find me any place, and I'll talk to you about anything. Kind of irritates my daughter when she's in town. But I have a lot of opinions. They're not always right, but I am absolutely open to listening to anybody else's, because although I feel like as a representative, my job is to do what's right first, well, constitutional first, what's right second, and what the people want third. I will absolutely do what the people want me to do if it's right and if it's constitutional. But I'm not going against the Constitution of the United States, period. I took an oath. I actually took it seriously. And I believe that the state of Nebraska people sometimes forget that they take the same oath. And it needs to be, the Constitution is the law of the land. We need to follow it. And we need to protect the people's freedom.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this evening. I do want to do some thank yous right now. Thank you first to the candidates for joining us. We have Brian Harden, Talon Cordell, Scott Shaver, Don Lees II, and Jeremiah Teeple. Also want to thank our host, Lisa Weborg, and Hotel 21 and Company for hosting us tonight. KNEB.TV and Rural Radio Scottsbluff for streaming this event. The Nebraska Farm Bureau and the local Farm Bureau chapters of Kimball, Banner, and Scottsbluff counties. And of course, you at home as well as you here in the audience asking all kinds of questions. We had a lot of them that went by the wayside, including many of mine as well. Unfortunately, the candidates will be sticking around. They'll be able to answer your questions individually. I want to thank you all very much for joining us this evening.